Hey guys, it's Laura. So you're going to notice some differences in my videos starting in 2025, and I'm going to put this little blurb at the front of several of my videos because I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but I definitely pre-record some of my videos and I schedule them out just because I need to be able to do that to manage my work and school and life balance. So I have several videos that are scheduled out for January of 2025 that have my old intro and my old channel name, and I've updated that as of January 1st. So kind of exciting. And I just wanted to kind of give a little explanation, I guess, before each of those videos and just let you know why you might hear me refer to Laura B. Floss Tube and why you may just see just some differences moving forward, especially when the videos later in January and then February and then further on start posting. So anyway, that is what I want to share with you. Welcome to Laura's Handmade Haven. I am so glad that you've joined me. I am still the same girl. I'm still the same crafter and creator. I've just kind of expanded what I do with my channel since I originally named it, and I just wanted my channel name to reflect that. And it definitely, I feel like it definitely opens up opportunities for me to bring in different types of content as we move forward. And I hope you're as excited about that as I am, because I am looking forward to sharing all kinds of crafty goodness with you. So without further ado, let's get started on today's video. Hey friends, it's Laura with Laura B. Floss Tube. Welcome or welcome back. I'm so glad you joined me today. We're continuing our Quilt Seed Pattern series, and we're working on the Mercantile Quilt Seeds. We are on pattern 2, which at least that's what I'm calling this one as pattern 2, is the scissors and buttons. So what I thought I would do in this week's video is just share with you how I get organized before I start cutting all my pattern pieces out. Because if you have any of the Quilt Seed patterns, you know that there are a lot of pieces to cut for these cute little blocks. Sometimes that can be a little overwhelming, and sometimes you just get so wrapped up in what to do that you can't find a way to do any of it. So I thought I'd just break down what I do to prepare and then start cutting for my next block. And then we will just do some sewing, and then I'll show you the finished block, and we will wrap up this week's video. I will tell you that I was a very, very fortunate girl, and my husband bought me kits for all 6 of the Quilt Seed patterns for Mercantile. And so I got fabric that is in the kit from the local quilt shop. So I have all the fabrics that I need to complete this block. And they're the fabrics that coordinate with what is in the pattern. So for that part of it, it does make it a little simpler. If you're using stash fabrics, I would encourage you to go through the cutting guide portion of your pattern and just pull out the different fabrics that you need, or at least know what you're going to use if you're pulling from your stash. So a few supplies that I like grabbing before I start cutting is my little alphabetties. And I did show you guys how I made some of these on my very own with some shrinky dink material. So check out that video if you haven't seen it. So I do have my alphabetties just sitting on my table. Another thing I do is, just in case I may not be able to complete this block in one sitting, I have design boards that I've made, and there's a video for that too on the channel. And they fit inside my 12 by 12 project keepers. So when I get my project keeper out for this block, I have 3 of these boards because I know there are a lot of pieces. And I put one of the boards inside the bottom of the project keeper. I actually take the lid off of it just while I'm cutting, and I'll put another board inside the lid, and I kind of sit those to the side, and that way they're kind of they're just kind of contained and out of my way, but I can use them as I'm going through. Obviously, you're going to need a ruler, a rotary cutter, and your pattern. Now, obviously, since this is a pattern for sale, I cannot show you what's inside of the pattern, but I'll walk you through and talk you through what I'm doing and what I'm looking at, just so when you start cutting, you know what you're doing as well. So the first thing that I do when I'm doing anything that has a lot of pieces is I do actually pre-cut all of my fabric. So what I like to do though is to stack that fabric in the order of the cutting guide. Now I know that some of you might be thinking that that might be a waste of time, but I believe that it does save me a lot of time in the long run because I don't have to hunt for fabric every time I go to cut the next piece. All right, so just going through my cutting guide, I can see that these fabrics are not stacked in the correct order. So what I do is I flip everything upside down, because this is the top and this is the first fabric in the cutting guide. So then I'm just going to go through and stack the rest of the fabrics. And after I get those stacked, then I will tell you what I do next. Most of my fabrics were actually stacked in the right order this time, but sometimes they're not. So I just kind of like to put them in the right order for my cutting, and then that fabric is just going to kind of be off to the side so I can just grab it as I need it. So the next thing I do is I go right to the cutting guide and I look at the first fabric that I'm cutting. Now again, I'm not going to tell you any of the sizes or anything like that that I'm cutting, because that is obviously part of the pattern. If I have like a yardage piece of fabric like this one, I will go ahead and cut off that selvage just to get rid of that, get that out of my way. And I will tell you, I use a lot of rulers, you guys. I love rulers. And so I just kind of try to use the rulers that will make the most sense for whatever I'm cutting. Depending on the size of the scrap, I will either keep it or toss it. And as you saw there, I did have a little scrap, so I just tossed that. Now, this is my first piece that I'm cutting, and this is actually labeled as X. So I'm going to put this on the board, and I'm going to go ahead and grab my alphabet out. I'm going to put that X right there. All right, so if you have little kids or pets or husbands running around, it may be a good idea to go ahead and add a little binding clip there and clip that onto your fabric, just in case that board gets tossed onto the floor. Then you can at least grab the fabric and you still have everything labeled and it's clipped on there, so you don't have to worry about sorting through those pieces again and again. Ask me how I know that. Oh my goodness, my poor husband. I love him so much. But there was this one time that I was cutting out a pretty intense quilt, and I had so many boards lying around my craft space, and he came in, sweet guy that he is, and just to talk to me for a few minutes. And when he went to leave, oh my goodness, when he went to leave, he bumped one of the board stacks, and 3 of my boards just went floating to the floor. I was not a happy camper, and I probably said some pretty harsh words to him at that point in time. I really do kind of feel bad about that. But at the same time, oh my goodness, I thought I was just going to die. I had so many pieces of fabric, and they were so many different sizes and very similar in size. And yeah, so it wasn't a great time. It wasn't ideal, that's what I'll say. So I'm just cutting through my fabric here, measuring as I go. Again, that little scrap I'll just toss. And again, I am labeling these as I go along, just so I don't have to search for them later. And when I start putting them on my boards, I kind of think about the alphabet a little bit. And I try to think, okay, I can get, there's 26 letters in the alphabet. I can get about 20 pieces on each board, probably. So I just kind of like start breaking them down. And as I move along with this, I will probably reorganize and shift things around on my boards. just so they're all in alpha order. Now this particular pattern, it actually goes through like triple C. So I'm definitely gonna have a lot of pieces for this one to cut out. All right, so then with the rest of this fabric, I'm just gonna fold it over upon itself and I'm gonna put it on a stack over to the side, and it's just gonna hang out there until I get the rest of it cut out. All right, so now that I have the first fabric cut, I just simply grab the second one and I will start cutting these out. Always make sure you double check your measurements before you cut. Otherwise, you may end up cutting the wrong size, and that's just sad. Especially when you're working with a kit, because sometimes, depending on who cut the kit for you, you may not have much extra fabric. So if you make that mistake, oh my goodness, you could be out of luck when it comes to having enough fabric. I just want to take a little different approach with this piece of fabric. What I did was I followed my cutting guide and I just cut all of the remaining pieces that I needed, and now they are in order on my cutting mat, and I'll just grab those letters. This works really well in case you need to cut one day and sew the next. It also just works in case you get interrupted. Not that we would ever get interrupted with our sewing, but you know, families tend to want our attention sometimes. This is a larger cut, so I'm actually using my cutting mat for this one. All right, so if I have a great big pattern like a Lori Holt applique quilt, where you may have, I don't know, 6 or 8 or 10 pages of cutting, I will use a pencil and just mark them off as I go. For something where it's like this small that I know, I'm pretty confident that I can get this cut out in one little crafty time. So I don't typically mark them off as I go along, but it wouldn't be a bad idea. And if you feel like you may get interrupted in your cutting, make sure that you just make a little mark on your cutting guide and show which ones you've already done. All right, so I'm going to continue cutting this out, and then I will see you again when we're at the sewing machine. Cutting the block out took a little bit of time, but now I am ready that I can just sit down and sew, follow the directions when I have time. So I just want to show you my boards just so you can get an idea of how I use my little binding clips and how I get it all sorted and organized for sewing. So here's the first board. I have 3 boards because there are a ton of pieces for this block. But so basically A through Z is on this board, and I do have them in alphabetical order. And then the next board actually has A through U on it. And the reason I split it U is because the final board, so I learned with the first block that I can split the alphabet because this one is actually, these pieces here are for the border that go around, that little scallop border that go around the block. So V through triple D are on this final board. Now all of these boards, which I did make these, and there is a video on my channel, so make sure you check that out. I think I mentioned it before, but just in case, all of these boards fit nicely in my project keeper. And the reason I do that is because in case I don't have time to sit down and sew this entire block today, everything is here and ready for me. It's clipped, it's sorted, and it is ready for me to stitch together. Now the lid isn't on here right now, but it's just off to the side, and I'll put that back on there. If I don't get all of my sewing done today, then I will just put the lid over it, and it is in one nice little container with no fear of losing pieces or losing my place, really. So at this point I can head on over to the sewing machine and start working to stitch together the scissors and buttons block. All right, so as I mentioned earlier in the video, I won't be sharing any pattern information because that is a copyright infringement. But I will share a little bit of the sewing. And I just wanted to kind of talk through why I take the extra time to make sure that I organize all my pieces. Riley Blake, when they write these patterns, they write the pattern to where you can grab the pieces for your blocks in alphabetical order. So like right now, I'm starting with step 1 for the piecing information, and I am grabbing pieces A and B to start with. So it's kind of nice, just because then you can just grab your pieces off your board and start stitching. You don't have to hunt around for them. So I just want to kind of share that information because you may be wondering why I would take all the extra time to make sure all of my pieces are in alphabetical order, why I cut them the way I do, etc., etc. So that's kind of the reason why. Because even though the cutting guide is not an alphabetical order, it's in order of fabric, the pattern itself is in order of the alphabet. So I can just grab pieces A and B to start my piecing, and then the next piece I need, believe it or not, is piece C. And we are just making this first little button. So let me grab my C rectangles rather. I was going to say triangles, but that's not true. Now I'm not pressing right here, and if you've watched me at all, you know that I'm just not a presser. I definitely will keep the pieced side up and the flat side down because I do want to make sure these little seams go the way I want them to. I want them to be pressed away from the light fabric there, which are like the buttonholes of my button. So I'm just kind of moving them and flipping them as I need to as I go across. Now, when I stitch the other rectangle onto this cute little button, it will also go on the bottom. And those seams should, stay put a little better this time, just because they have one stitch in them, not too far away. This is a pretty cute little button, but definitely tiny pieces. Now at this point, I have something that kind of looks like a button, but not really. So the next thing we're going to do is do those stitch and flip corners. If you've done any Lori Holt patterns, you know that she does a lot of stitch and flip. Sometimes I think she calls them easy corners, but these are stitch and flips, where you just put the square on the corner and you stitch across. These little pieces are a little fiddly, but we'll get through it. For anyone who is wondering, I am using a Juki DX7. I love my Juki. I have it set on just a straight stitch. I'm using a 1/4 inch piecing foot, and my stitch length is adjusted down to 2.0 from the standard 2.4. There is a 1/4 inch stitch on the Juki DX7. I don't use it. You use a regular pressing foot with it. I prefer using my 1/4 inch piecing foot and just adjusting the stitch length down instead of using the 1/4 inch. I have used the 1/4 inch stitch on the Juki a couple times, and it does do a really good job. I don't know, I prefer my 1/4 inch stitching foot. All right, so I'm going to continue working on these buttons, and then when I get past the buttons, I will catch up with you there. And so now we're going to move on to the scissors. And the scissors, you have to make sure that you kind of slow down a little bit and pay attention to the scissors, because there are some pieces on that that you can mess up if you don't. So make sure you slow down the scissors, because you're doing like 2 halves on the scissors and they're mirror images, which I gotta tell you that I am definitely angrily challenged, and sometimes that gets the best of me. The first part of the scissors that you're going to be doing is the handles. There's actually 2 pair of scissors in this block. So just, take your time, follow the pattern, double check all of your angles, make sure you're double checking all of your pieces, that you have the right ones, and just take it slow. Now you'll notice that I am kind of chain piecing these sort of through my machine. I'm doing one handle at a time, but I'm just adding the same piece to both of the handles. And just like the buttons, I'm putting the non-pieced piece on the bottom so I can decide, or I can determine which way my seams are laying on the top. Now again, you're going to do the stitch and flip corners. Since I do have 2 of these going, I'm just going to go back and forth and do one corner at a time because these are a little bigger than the little buttons that we did. To save myself time, which I'm sure you guys have noticed, I do have washi tape on my sewing machine extension table, and I just use that to line up the corners of my pieces. And then I don't have to mark from corner to corner on all of the little squares. The handles are both the same. They look the same. You piece them the same. No difference between those. The difference comes in when you go to do the blades, because you have to do 2 of them and you're doing mirror images. So it's going to be kind of up to you which way you want to do that. I am going to do them kind of in tandem. So I'm going to gather all my pieces here. See how I can just like lay that point right there, and then I don't have to mark anything. And again, just take your time with this and make sure that you are consulting your cutting guide and making sure your angles are right. Otherwise your blades won't be right. I'm going to continue working on this, and then I'll show you more of it when we get towards... All right, so I have all of the buttons and the 2 pair of scissors completed. All that's left in the center of this block to do is this star. So I started doing the 4 patches, and I thought, oh, I should share how I'm going to do that, just so maybe you can pick up a tip on how to efficiently piece these 4 patches for that beautiful little star block. So on my sewing machine extension table, I have both the piles of the gold and the background fabric, and I'm just putting them together just to piece my 4 patches. But what I'm doing is when I'm feeding them through the machine, I'm making sure that I'm feeding them through the machine the way the 4 patch is going to look. So I'm basically reversing. So the first one going through has the white square on top, the second one going through has the gold square on top. So I'm going to finish up doing that part, and then I'm going to show you what the result of that method is as soon as I get all 4 of them put together. All right, so I cut these apart in groups of 2, and the reason I did that is because now when they are hanging with that little chain in between, that's exactly what I need for my 4-patch. So all I'm going to do is just put these together, flip that center seam so the seam nests, and run that through my sewing machine. So now as soon as I get these little guys together, I'll have the 4 patches done for that star block. I think the next part that we work on is the center. If you're an adamant spinner, you are probably having a heart attack right now. I apologize for that. But I just don't pin very often. I do for borders on quilts, but not for little pieces. Unless I'm working on, I do have a couple blocks that I like to do that definitely requires some precision, and poking a little pin through the middle of some seams will definitely help with that. All right, so the next thing is the center of this block, and for that I need 3 different pieces, including the one little gold one that was left over. And I'm just going to lay this out on my extension table right here so I can see exactly what that block is going to look like. This is really helpful, especially if you have directional fabric, which none of these are directional, but sometimes, you know, you may have a directional fabric and you want to make sure everything goes the same way. But what I'm going to do for this block is it's a 9-patch, so I'm going to take the first 2 on each row, and I'm going to make sure that the middle row square is on the top. And then as soon as we are done with this, we'll cut the thread. And here's our little 4 patches too. They're just gonna hang out here for a minute. We'll go press them. And now when I flip this open, I can just add in that 3rd column piece to complete the first row. And I'll be able to do the same thing with this as I did with the 4 patches. I can leave those little chains together and leave my 3 rows together and sew the block into one piece. So now when I open this up, you're going to see that I have the center star block correct, and it is a good idea to open this up and double check yourself, because there have definitely been times that I thought I was right and I went to sew it together, or I did sew it together and then found out that I was not right. That's never ideal to find out, when, especially after it's already in the top. All right, I'm going to do the same thing for this block as I did for the center block. I'm just going to lay it out on my sewing bed extension table here in the way that it should look. The one thing you want to keep in mind with the star block is just make sure your 4 patches are angled correctly. And then as you can see, these little flying geese, you have quite a bit of space there. It's not the normal 1/4 inch that you have with the traditional flying geese. So just make sure you have all of those laid out correctly. And then what we will do is the same thing as what we did with the 9-patch. We're going to take the first 2 block pieces in each row and we're going to stitch those together. And then obviously we're going to keep that middle square on top, and that will ensure that we can chain piece the entire block together. Just make sure you don't change the direction of those little 4 patches. Oh, I have done that too many times to count, but all right. And then again, just make sure, I just try to double and triple check those little 4 patches. Anytime that they're supposed to be going a specific way, you just want to make sure that they are oriented correctly. All right. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and open up this block and make sure before we sew everything together that everything looks correct, and then we're gonna flip over the first 2 rows and sew those together. All right, now this block is gonna get a good press, and we'll start looking to see what we need to do to assemble that center block. Now you can follow the directions on the pattern, or you can just follow the picture. There is a picture guide in the pattern, which is kind of nice. It can definitely help you figure out which sashings and stuff go where. It's kind of up to you. Okay, I'm going to give this a good press, and we'll have a little wrap up for this week's video. I obviously still need to do this border on this block, but that's where I'm going to wrap up for today. Basically, I just wanted to show you how you could take just the center of this block and then add any border to it you wanted, or you could just border it the way it is, or you could leave it the way it is and make a cute little side of a tote bag or the back of a jacket or something like that with this cute little block. You could definitely, the way this block was constructed, this half and this half, even though they're not exactly 50% each, you could take just this portion of the block and make that into a cute project bag. You could take just this portion, you could take just this star and make this and remake this star however many times over that you want for a nice throw size or even a bed size quilt. So these blocks, when you look at them, don't look at them as just one great big block, but also look at them as this individual elements that are in the blocks. So that's where I'm going to end this week's video. I hope you found a couple tips and tricks along the way that were helpful to you. Don't forget to label your pieces. Get yourself either some, if you don't have alphabetties and you haven't made the shrinky-dink alphabet tiles yet, then get yourself some post-it notes or index cards or something and make sure you're labeling all those pieces. It's going to help you tremendously when you go to start assembling your block. Until next time, I hope you find joy in all you do. Carve out some time for crafting and creating, and make sure it's always happy stitching.